On February the 20th, 2015, Avon and Somerset Police in the UK received a phone call from the family of Becky Watts, who was just 16, saying that she'd gone missing. Within hours, an intense search was started and desperate appeals were made by her family for information. However, by this point, she was already dead, having been murdered by her stepbrother, Nathan Matthews, a paedophile who had a fixation on petite teenage girls. As if killing her was not bad enough, she'd been dismembered, and the police captured him behind the circular saw he used for this sickening task. But he was not alone in his crimes. He was helped by his girlfriend, Shauna Hoare. This evil couple thought they were very clever and had gotten away with murder, but their lies were quickly uncovered, and their sickening crime and their pathetic attempts to manipulate the police were laid bare. Welcome to Evil Among Us. Rebecca Marie Watts, known as Becky, was born on the 3rd of June 1998 in Bristol, a city in southwest England. It doesn't seem like she had the easiest start in life, with her parents splitting up before she was born, and she spent the first few years of her life living with her mother, Tanya Watts. Becky was taken into care aged 3 due to concerns about neglect, before living with her father, Darren Galsworthy, and his partner, a woman called Angie Matthews, who had a son from a previous relationship, Nathan Matthews. Becky had delayed speech and didn't talk properly until she was around 3.5 years old, and tragically, her first proper word was apparently Nathan. Angie said that although Becky was her stepdaughter, they were inseparable, and she loved her, and raised her as though she was her own biological daughter. Becky also had a close relationship with her biological mother, Tanya, despite not living with her, and they would see each other regularly. However, a lack of support during her vital early years meant that Becky struggled with various issues throughout her short life, including anxiety and self-confidence. Becky went to Summerhill Junior School, where her teachers remembered her as a quiet but happy pupil, with one teacher saying, quote, "She was incredibly shy and incredibly quiet, but by the end of year 5, she started to come out of herself." However, it was when Becky moved to secondary school at the age of 11 that she began to have difficulties. She was bullied, and comments were specifically made about her weight. This shattered Becky's already fragile self-esteem. When she was 13 years old, Angie called the local Children and Young People services and asked for help, as Becky was refusing to go to school. Various professionals engaged with Becky, and she was showing a high level of defiance and aggression when challenged, and it was clear this was a defence mechanism, as she developed a significant fear of people and places, and tragically, she was particularly terrified about being abducted, as she'd scared herself reading various stories on the internet. Becky also developed anorexia, and her issues meant that she was referred to a child psychologist and an eating disorder clinic to try and help her. In addition, Becky began engaging with the Hospital Education Service, a specialist service providing education for children who have mental or physical health issues, which mean they're unable to attend mainstream school. The combination of a new school environment and therapy meant that Becky started to get better. She was coping better when attending her classes, began to develop friendships, and began doing things that teenage girls did, like going out shopping with her friends and going to sleepovers. However, when she was 14 years old, concerns were raised again when Becky told teachers that she was being pressured into sending indecent images of herself to other boys, and they also wanted her to send explicit text messages. Becky was referred to services that provide support to children at risk of sexual exploitation. Unfortunately, whilst the focus of professionals was on protecting Becky from predatory males in the world, the most dangerous person in her life was someone she knew well, someone she called her stepbrother, Nathan Matthews, a disturbed and predatory paedophile who, rather than protecting her, would end her life. I usually refer to the offenders in my videos by their last name, but as one of their last names is Hoare, using this might distract from what I'm saying, so I'll just use their first names on this occasion. So, Nathan Charles Matthews was born on the 9th of January 1987 in Bristol to his mother Angie. He never knew his father. At around the age of 7 years old, Nathan went to live with his grandparents. Why he moved there is unclear, but it seems he had regular contact with his mother, and then eventually Becky Watts' father, Darren Galsworthy, when the pair began their relationship. His early years seem unremarkable. There may have been early warning signs suggesting the monster he'd become, but none of these are documented. As a teenager, Nathan joined an army cadet attachment at Cadbury Heath in Bristol. He seemed to enjoy this and was seen as a model cadet. During this time, he was given weapons training, but also, importantly for later, was taught how to deal with spillages, including using a product similar to cat litter to absorb liquid, but also cover up odour. Nathan went on to study electrical engineering at the City of Bristol College, before, at the age of 18 years old, joining the Royal Logistics Corps Army Reserves, training at the Maindee Barracks in Cardiff, so basically he was a part-time soldier. It was at this point where warning signs appear to have been noted. Nathan was described as a good soldier, but was also known to be, quote, stroppy, with a fellow squaddy stating, quote, he had a bit of an anger problem at times. He would sometimes snap in frustration and throw things in temper sometimes. It's also important to point out at this point that since he was a child, Nathan suffered from a rheumatic condition known as fibromyalgia, a chronic illness that causes pain and tenderness throughout the body. The severity of this condition varies from person to person, but, in Nathan's case, it was sometimes severe and he would often be debilitated by pain. So it seems likely that Nathan was a man plagued by feelings of inadequacy and shame due to his height, with him being only 5'5", and his physical health issues. It seems that Nathan was a petulant, immature man who expected others to do what he said. He wanted to be in control of situations and people, as a way to feel powerful to offset the deep, dark hole of insecurity inside of him. As he got older, Nathan's behaviour in the family home also began to deteriorate. Initially, he and Becky appeared close, but he began to resent her. He was jealous of how close she was with Angie, and he looked for any opportunity to destroy her self-esteem. This included calling her fat, knowing full well that she was battling anorexia. The pair would have frequent arguments, and this included Nathan chasing Becky upstairs, shouting that he would kill her. Becky once told a psychologist that she was afraid of Nathan. However, it was what Nathan was doing in his private life which gives a window into his twisted mind. So from around his mid-teens, Nathan had developed an obsession with pornography and would spend hours at a time watching porn on his computer. He had a particular obsession with videos and pictures showing violent sex with females, and especially while they were restrained in some way. Evidence later showed they'd been watching videos where the scenario was men breaking into homes, tying up and raping the female occupants. He was also particularly fixated on legal pornography which fits under the umbrella of, quote, teen, where you have an adult actress clearly made to look younger than she is, so that some viewers can fantasize that she's a child while not getting into trouble for possessing this material. Despite his overt conflict with Becky, it's clear that he was also sexually attracted to her from a young age. It was later disclosed that he'd rubbed Becky's inner thigh in a sexual way when she was 8 years old, and he was around 20, and he'd apparently done this to two of her friends who were the same age. It's apparent that Nathan had fantasies about controlling women and little girls, sexually violating them in order to take what he wanted and dominate them, and this extended to how he would act towards his partners. In around 2006, Nathan, then aged around 19 years old, began a relationship with a woman known only as KJ. She later reported to the police that Nathan was controlling and abusive in the relationship, demanding sex whenever he wanted, as well as controlling who she saw and what she did. He would always either need to be with her or in constant contact with her, questioning her on what she was up to. KJ managed to escape the relationship. I do not know how old KJ was, but it seems that she may have been an adult, or at least over the age of consent in the UK, which is 16. However, after KJ left him, it appears that Nathan began looking for teenage girls to start relationships with, and he was looking for those who were particularly vulnerable. No doubt he was doing this because he was sexually attracted to teenage girls, but he also thought it would be easier to control a child. In 2008, he met 14-year-old Shauna Hoare. Shauna Stacey Charmaine Hoare was born on the 12th of February 1994 in Bristol. Her childhood was extremely dysfunctional. Her father left the family home when she was very young, and her mother, Lisa Donovan, remarried soon afterwards. Before the age of 5, Shauna was taken into care due to concerns about neglect, emotional and physical abuse within the home. She was one of 8 children her mother had with 3 different men. Shauna moved from foster home to foster home, never settling in one place for very long. Eventually, Shauna returned to live with Lisa at home in Bristol when she was 13 years old. I don't have information about what Shauna saw or experienced in foster care, but I imagine that this and her early years at home led to her becoming an extremely damaged child. By the age of 13 years old, she was smoking, drinking, and it appears sexually active, being preyed upon by older men. During this same year, the police received a report that she'd been raped on her way to school, but she refused to give a statement, so no one was arrested. Just a year later, when Shauna was 14, she met Nathan Matthews. How or where is unclear. Shauna's mother Lisa later recalled meeting Nathan, stating that he was, quote, controlling and flirty with everyone, sexually orientated, very overpowering, and this apparently included rubbing up against one of her other daughters, who was also a teenager. Unfortunately, this gives an insight into the environment and people which shaped Shauna. She was underage and brought a man round to the house who was around 21 years old at the time, and her mother apparently didn't bat an eyelid. Nathan told his mother and stepfather that Shauna was 16 years old, and despite any reservations they may have had, they tried to make Shauna feel welcome, as she became part of the family, to the point where she was registered as Angie's carer due to her having multiple sclerosis. And when she and Darren got married in 2013, she was a bridesmaid, and this picture is truly horrifying, knowing that one of the people in this photograph would be dead less than 2 years after it was taken, and 2 others would utterly destroy the trust placed in them by Darren and Angie and tear the family apart. In order to fully understand the murder of Becky Watts and what happened afterwards, I need to explain the relationship between Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare, which began in 2008 and continued for around the next 7 years until their arrest. It was a complicated relationship, which, in my opinion, was characterised by a shifting dynamic that began with obvious one-sided abuse, but then devolved into something even more horrific. I want to be clear that by highlighting trauma in the backgrounds of the offenders in my videos, I'm not condoning their actions. I merely provide this information to help understand the people they were. Trust me, whilst I might empathise with the trauma in their lives, I've absolutely no sympathy for the crimes they commit. With that being said, it's clear that Nathan was abusive and controlling towards Shauna. She was not allowed to buy cigarettes and other items for herself, and had to ask him. When he would buy her things, he would expect her gratitude to be paid with sexual favours. Nathan would also demean Shauna, saying she was, quote, too fat and needed to lose weight. He directed what she could eat and when. He would also abuse her in front of other people, including one time when Nathan told her to, quote, shut the fuck up, you twat, when she tried to speak up about something. During the trial, one of Shauna's friends described Nathan severing the link between them and him making it very difficult for her to see her friends. If she did end up going out to see people, he would demand to always be there, and if it involved a drive, Nathan would demand that the person they were going to visit send him money to pay for petrol. Shauna later described the relationship as follows, quote, I basically spent almost 6 years joined to him. One way or another, it was like I was going to be stuck like this forever, never able to go out, do anything. When she was 16, Nathan gave Shauna permission to go to college, where she wanted to study childcare, but he quickly changed his mind and forbid her from going due to his jealousy about her even speaking to other men. He and Shauna began living together from around 2010. Neither worked consistently and so relied on benefits, and their home, as shown later, was in a state of squalor. Behind closed doors, Nathan was also violent and frequently beat Shauna, with the most serious incident, which has echoes of his later behaviour, involving him grabbing Shauna by the hair and then strangling her for several seconds. If Shauna tried to leave the relationship, Nathan would pull out every trick in the book to regain control over her, including trying to gain sympathy by self-harming. On one occasion, when she ended the relationship, Nathan stabbed himself with a fork and violently scratched his own face. As Shauna grew up, Nathan appears to have lost sexual interest in her and looked for other ways to get his kicks. One way was to ask Shauna to organise a threesome with one of her young-looking friends, which happened several times, with him filming this. However, he would also tell Shauna about his fantasies about abducting and raping teenage girls. Text messages recovered after both of their arrests show the sickening fantasies that both appeared to have, with Shauna apparently encouraging Nathan and even trying to procure him potential victims. In November 2014, just months before Becky's murder, Nathan was working as a takeaway delivery driver when he delivered a takeaway to a 16-year-old girl's house. Obviously, due to having an order, he knew her name and began searching for her on Facebook. Messages show that Nathan gave Shauna her name and asked her to message the girl, which she did, apparently to try and convince her to come round so that Nathan could have sex with her. Whether she responded is not entirely clear, but on the 2nd of January 2015, Nathan sent the following message to Shauna saying, quote, "She came into the shop, but didn't speak to me. I didn't say anything to her either, as I was talking to a man. Laugh out loud, awkward." Police recovered a series of much more disturbing messages from the 9th of December 2014, which began with Nathan saying to Shauna, quote, "Fuck you, bring me back 2 pretty schoolgirls then." Shauna replied, "Laugh out loud, yeah, I'll just kidnap them from school." Later that day, Shauna sent Nathan a message saying, quote, "Just went to Cost Cutter and saw a very pretty petite girl, almost knocked her out to bring home, laugh out loud." Less than a minute later, Nathan wrote, "Don't you almost me, now fucking do it, bitch." Shauna said, "Laugh my fucking arse off, yeah? I'll just go back in time to when I saw her, time travel with her to our attic, laugh out loud." Police were able to track down both children and establish they'd not been harmed, but it became clear the resemblance that both girls had to Becky, and, generally, from the contents of his computer, it was apparent that Nathan was fixated with children who looked just like his stepsister. Living in squalid conditions, barely working, whilst watching pornography together, and discussing Nathan's sexual fantasies, the topic of Becky inevitably came up repeatedly. Shauna would later state in court that Nathan said he, quote, "hated Becky." I think there are 2 reasons for this, compared to the bullshit he came up with in court. Firstly, her lifestyle. He was a man who'd amounted to nothing, living in a shit tip. But Becky, the intruder in the family, was a beautiful 16-year-old girl, with her life ahead of her, who was starting to overcome her difficulties and live her life. But I think he also hated he could not have her. She was his sexual obsession, and not being able to have her was driving him crazy. So by early 2015, he devised a plan to take what he wanted by kidnapping and raping her, and depriving Becky of the life he felt that he deserved by killing her. Shauna was inevitably a victim in this relationship when she was a child, a girl in the hands of a predatory, manipulative paedophile who ground her down, who spent significant efforts moulding her into the woman that she became. I think that repeated exposure to the sick, depraved man that Nathan Matthews is led to Shauna, who was already a very troubled person, developing horrific, distorted attitudes and beliefs, which meant that she shared his delusions that abducting, raping and killing children was acceptable, and, like him, probably found these fantasies sexually arousing. This is known as a folie à deux, and is something seen in other killer couples. However, regardless of whatever control and influence Nathan had over Shauna, I firmly believe that he simply built on something that was fundamentally missing within her all along, including a lack of conscience and a lack of empathy for others. I think this is shown by her cold and calculated behaviour after the murder. I think looking a bit deeper into her background, you begin to see her own twisted behaviour before she'd even met Nathan. Specifically, people who knew Shauna when she was a child state that she was a compulsive liar. She would pretend to be pregnant and have cancer in order to gain attention. She was fully willing to manipulate others in her own right. I think one point which will likely guarantee any sympathy for Shauna is lost, and further epitomise the selfishness and horrific nature of the pair, is the fact that these two had a child together, a daughter. They themselves were parents. This is detail that doesn't appear in almost any newspaper article, but is confirmed by a serious case review that I've read, and Shauna herself in one of her police interviews. This child was born towards the end of 2012. I've got no other information, but even this speaks volumes. Despite being a mother herself, the parents of a female child, she was willing to help her partner rape and murder the child of another mother. Same logic applies to Nathan, and it's clear they both didn't give a shit about this child, risking their daughter growing up without a mother or a father just so Nathan could get his kicks. So regardless of whether Shauna was a victim once upon a time, by the point of the murder she was a willing accomplice, a mother who decided that her and her partner's fantasies of raping and killing someone else's child were justified. The date chosen to abduct, rape and kill Becky Watts was the 19th of February 2015, and it's clear this date was chosen for a reason. Becky's father Darren would not be home, and Angie had a hospital appointment. Becky would be alone in the house. By this point, Nathan had put together what was described in court as a, quote, kidnap kit. This included a large bag, stun guns, handcuffs, face masks and duct tape. With everything in place, this evil pair put their plan into action. What happened to Becky Watts and the timeline can be established from various sources, including eyewitness testimony, police investigation, and even the statements of Nathan Matthews when he wasn't lying, which was rarely. What we do know is that on the 19th of February 2015, Becky's father Darren Galsworthy was at work, and her stepmother, Angie Matthews, was picked up to go to a hospital appointment at around 10:30 a.m, leaving Becky in the house alone, with her being sat in her bedroom, texting her friends and her boyfriend. At 10:50 a.m, Nathan and Shauna left their home at 14 Cotton Mill Lane and drove towards 18 Crown Hill, Bristol, Becky's home address. This journey would only have taken 10 minutes, but they stopped at a local Tesco's to buy batteries for the stun guns. In the vehicle, strapped into her car seat, was the pair's daughter, who would have been around 2 years old at this point. Becky sent her final text message at 11:07, and it's assumed that Nathan and Shauna arrived soon afterwards. It's known that entry was gained to the house with a key that was left hidden outside for emergencies, and, by his later confession, Nathan put a mask on and went upstairs to Becky's bedroom. Whether Shauna also went up to the bedroom at this point is unclear. Nathan went into Becky's room and attacked her. Becky fought for her life ferociously, and her post-mortem showed that she had 40 bruises on her body from her attempts to fend off Nathan. He wrapped tape around her head and eventually placed his hand over Becky's mouth and nose, restricting her breathing until she suffocated to death. I imagine that, narcissist that he is, Nathan imagined walking into Becky's room, using his army trainings to subdue her, and then forcing her into the large bag he'd brought with him and taking her away to a separate location, no doubt to rape and eventually kill her. But he was as weak as piss, and no doubt overestimated his prowess and had to fight Becky every inch of the way. Now dead, Nathan put Becky's body in the bag and it was taken out of the house. In court it was argued that, due to Nathan's physical health issues, he would have likely been unable to carry Becky's body without some sort of assistance. Therefore, it's apparent based on this that Shauna helped move Becky's body out of the house and likely helped him put her in the bag in the first place. The bag containing Becky's body was placed in the car boot, and at 12:45 p.m, when Angie returned from the hospital, she found Nathan, Shauna and her granddaughter in the property watching TV. A few hours later, Darren came home from work. Neither Angie or Darren had any idea that in order to get into the house, they'd walked within feet of Becky's body hidden in the car. Eventually, at around 7 p.m, Nathan and Shauna made their excuses and drove back home, taking Becky's body with them. When they got back to their own property, Becky's body was placed in the bath, and Nathan then stabbed her 19 times with a knife and also stabbed her in the neck with a screwdriver. No doubt this was him taking out his anger on her, that his plan had not worked and she had fought back. How dare she not give him what he wanted? Becky's body remained in the bath overnight, and just after midday on the 20th of February 2015, Nathan was caught on CCTV buying a power saw, the tool he would use to dismember Becky. He then set about this gruesome task. In court, Nathan would claim when he did this, he, quote, closed my eyes, had the saw in one hand, with him implying that he was so disgusted with his actions that he could not bear to look, and basically dismembered Becky blind. However, the prosecution noted that there was no damage to the bathtub itself. Nathan was fully in control and methodically cut up the body of his 16-year-old stepsister. That same day, Shauna made searches online, including going on YouTube and typing, quote, "Do you want to hide a body?" Sickeningly, what she was looking for was a spoof video of the song "Do You Want to Build a Snowman" from the film Frozen, which depicts two girls acting out a scene where they place a body inside a rucksack and sing lyrics such as, quote, "Will you help me hide a body? It doesn't have to be in one piece." So these two pieces of shit, whilst the dead body of a 16-year-old child was lying in their flat, were listening to a comedy parody song. This detail shows the absolute lack of remorse of this pair. They were no doubt exhilarated by what they had done, and like typical psychopaths, they obviously thought they were very clever and could easily get away with this. Becky's body was cut into 8 pieces, and her head, left arm, right hand, left hand, right leg and torso were all wrapped separately, being bound tightly in cling film, duct tape and parcel tape. Some of the parts were covered in table salt or cat litter in order to absorb any fluids and reduce the smell of decomposition. Becky's body was then placed inside 3 suitcases. On both February the 21st and February the 22nd, 2015, Nathan and Shauna were seen going to various shops, buying cleaning products to try and cover up the crime scene. Whilst Becky Watts was murdered on the 19th of February 2015, it wasn't until the 20th of February that she was reported missing to the police. This was apparently because her family assumed that she'd gone out on the 19th and then had simply decided to stay over at a friend's house. However, on the 20th of February 2015, Becky's boyfriend and a friend went to her house and said they were concerned. So it wasn't until 4 PM on the 20th of February 2015 that the police were called. They began the investigation immediately, and it soon became clear the circumstances of Becky's disappearance were suspicious, as she hadn't got any money with her, no change of clothes, and she hadn't told anyone where she was going. The police began searching the local area, including going house to house and searching open areas including a local nature reserve. They took to social media looking for information using the hashtag #FindBecky. On the 23rd of February 2015, Becky's father and stepmother, Darren and Angie, made an appeal for information about her disappearance, as shown by this clip.
She's your typical teenage girl. Lots of selfies, music, fashion.
Becky's father and stepmother told me today that her disappearance is completely out of character, and they are desperate for news.
Bex, if you can see this, get in contact. And if anyone out there knows something, just tell us. Just bring her home safe. If you've got her, then put her somewhere we can find her. We want her home, please.
She's not in trouble. She's just wanted here. We just want her back. That's all we want.
This clip is haunting, not only because by this point Becky was already dead and had been dismembered, but also because her son killed his daughter. Police quickly became interested in Nathan and Shauna, as they had been in the house around the time that Becky went missing. Initially, they were considered witnesses, and the police first contacted them on the 23rd of February 2015 to come in for interview. Alarm bells started ringing when both seemed not particularly bothered about prioritising trying to find Becky, with them stating they were too busy to come in. What the police later found out was that Nathan and Shauna were playing for time, as they knew the police were circling and they needed to get rid of Becky's dismembered body, which was still in their flat. So, on the evening of the 23rd of February 2015, Nathan called a friend of his, 29-year-old Carl Demetrius, and said that he would pay him to move and store the suitcases and other items at his home address. The sum promised was around £10,000. Carl then contacted a friend of his, 23-year-old James Ireland, who was promised around half the money to help Carl load the items in a van at Nathan's property and then unload them at the other end. Both of them travelled to Nathan's address, loaded up Becky's body parts in the van, and then drove back to 9 Barton Court, a property just 80 metres away. This was the property of Carl and his 23-year-old partner J. Dean Parsons, and the suitcases containing Becky's body parts were then hidden in their garden shed. In addition, items used in the initial crime, the dismemberment, and the clean-up were also hidden here. All three would later claim they had no idea what was in the suitcases and were simply focused on the money they had been promised, and, when pushed, said they thought it might have been drugs in the suitcases. With Becky's remains now out of the way, suddenly Nathan and Shauna made themselves available to the police, and they were interviewed twice, on the 26th of February and the 27th of February 2015. Both were cocky, confident, and especially related to Nathan, seemed amused by the whole situation, with him smirking during questioning and complaining about his back hurting and how being questioned was hurting his little brain. I'm going to show 2 clips. The first is part of the first interview with Sean on the 26th of February 2015, which I've had to cut up because the sound goes completely haywire towards the end. The second clip shows part of her second interview the next day.
I think we got there about 11ish. The door was locked, so obviously we used a key from underneath the recycling bin. Got in. Heard music upstairs. Assumed Becky had been in then. I went into the kitchen to get a cigarette and went to go outside to have a cigarette. My daughter started whinging because she wanted to come out with me, so I took her down to the garden to help feed the rabbit while I had a cigarette. Probably was about 15-20 minutes. Then we came back up. I went into the kitchen to get a drink, I think it was, and wash my hands. Then I heard the front door slam. Carried on washing my hands, went into the living room. And then I think it wasn't until a lot later on that Angie asked me if Becky had gone out. And I said, yeah, I heard the door go. She must have gone out earlier. Washing my hands, I think, I heard the door slam, front door. Again, I didn't look at the time or think anything of it, so I didn't really kind of like, oh, what was that? It was just the door, so Becky would have gone out.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I think I've accidentally got this in the wrong order here.
Okay.
You have to clarify this. So, right, let me just go back slightly then, if I could. The door slamming then. You've already said you got to go from the kitchen through to the living room.
Yep.
So, how far away from that front door would you be?
But you've got the front door, the living room, and about halfway up the hallway is the kitchen. So I would have been at the sink. So no distance, a reasonable amount, I'd say.
Okay. And immediately before this sound of the door slamming, what could you hear then?
I think it was just CBeebies again, to be honest. I was kind of more, trying to make sure I had vitamins back and getting my drink.
Yeah.
No, I heard stomping down the stairs. That's what made me think that Becky had left in a mood. So I said to Angie, because obviously the door slammed, but I wasn't sure if that was the wind. I took it because there was like quite stomp down the stairs. I assumed, she was in a bit of one of her tantrums.
Yeah. And then the only other thing was just a minor thing really, but I think some of our colleagues were trying to speak to Nathan, just part of those initial inquiries just a few days ago on Tuesday, I think it was, and they sort of perceived a bit of reluctance. Do you have any knowledge of that?
Not to my knowledge, man. I wouldn't know, no.
No. Okay. Has Nathan had any sort of concerns about speaking to us?
Not that he's told me, no.
No. Okay.
If he does, I wouldn't know though.
Yeah. How is he finding it?
He's found it quite hard actually. Again, he's kind of more thinking, my God, if it was...
Yeah.
Or again, knowing how hard it'd be for his mum at the moment. Because Becky was almost like her daughter to her.
Yeah.
When it is.
And then over the weekend, have either you or Nathan been involved in searching for Becky or doing any?
No, I wasn't aware they were doing a search. I didn't realise until I think it was yesterday.
Yeah.
I went on my Facebook and obviously there was news articles and pictures popped up about that they did the search, but we weren't told about it at all.
Well, that's fine. Okay, so to Nathan, that's actually a good thing. Where did you guys go then over the weekend? I don't know if you're able to remember that far back.
Well, the weekend that Becky, after
Becky went missing. I think if I help you, so I think it was on Monday actually that you spoke to police officers, detectives,
which would have been outside my mum's house.
That's right.
So I would have went to my mum's that day.
So that was a Monday.
I think I went over on Tuesday.
Where did you stay on Monday night? Do you remember?
It would have been at my house, but we didn't leave until about midnight, to be honest.
You left about midnight
Yeah,
Monday. and
most
then-
nights we did. Tuesday we went over again.
Yeah,
Again, probably would have left about midnight.
yeah.
Wednesday, I think we stayed in my house. We might have gone over again Wednesday, actually, sorry, I think. Thursday, which was yesterday.
That was yesterday.
Yeah, we had the interview, and then obviously we've gone over again
Midnight.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Wednesday we started watching a film or two films that my mum's fell asleep, and we didn't leave until like 2 o'clock in the morning or something.
On Wednesday.
Yeah, that was
Into
it. Yeah,
Thursday, yeah.
and then Thursday we obviously had the interview, and then today.
I'm sure you picked up on a few things. The complete lack of any emotion, any care or concern. I don't believe that Shauna has the ability to express these emotions and doesn't understand them, hence why her presentation is so bizarre. I mean, your partner's stepsister, who you know well, has gone missing and you didn't realise people were out looking. I don't know about you, but if someone I cared about went missing, you couldn't drag me away from searching every single nook and cranny. I'd be pounding the streets every minute of every day. The police also noticed this strange presentation, as well as the fact that Nathan and Shauna's stories match perfectly. Human memory is bad. People can have widely different recollections of the same incident, so having two people give exactly the same story is suspicious, and it was clear they'd both come up with the story and rehearsed it, which was basically they went to the house, didn't see Becky, but heard the door slam, so assumed that she just left. I imagine it was at this point the police knew that Becky was not alive anymore, and they had spoken to the people responsible, but they needed evidence to make the arrest. Police returned to Becky's property and found a small amount of blood outside her bedroom door with a fingerprint in it. The blood was found to be Becky's, and the fingerprint belonged to Nathan. This was enough, and Nathan and Shauna were arrested for kidnapping on the 28th of February 2015, and, with them in police custody, their house was forensically examined. These photos show the inside of the property that Shauna and Nathan, and I assume their daughter, lived in. It's absolutely disgusting. There's piles of rubbish everywhere. However, the police noticed that the bath was absolutely spotless. By making this one area spotless, it acted like a massive beacon, and the police knew that someone had gone to great lengths to clean this room for some reason, and obviously it would later be discovered that Becky had been dismembered in the bath, and the pair had spent days cleaning up the horrific scene. Police also found receipts for the circular saw used to dismember Becky, as well as gloves, goggles, and other items used in this despicable crime. On the 2nd of March 2015, both Nathan and Shauna, who remained in police custody, were arrested on suspicion of Becky's murder. On the 2nd of March 2015, after days of questioning, with all the evidence stacking up against him, Nathan Matthews gave the following prepared statement to the police, which reads, quote, "I, Nathan Charles Matthews, date of birth 9th of January 1987, accept that I am responsible for the death of Rebecca Watts. On the 19th of February 2015, I attended 18 Crown Hill with my girlfriend Shauna Hoare. 18 Crown Hill is where my mother lives with Darren Galsworthy. Rebecca Watts also lived there. Shauna is my mother's registered carer, so we regularly go to the house to help with housework and help with my mother's needs. Although we usually went on Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays, we'd also go there on other days. On Thursday the 19th of February, part of the reason for going round was to return a tin to my grandmother. My grandmother was due to take my mother to a medical appointment and bring her back. In my car, I had a large bag, a stun device, handcuffs, tape and mask. I developed an idea to scare Rebecca by kidnapping her. I wanted to kidnap her to teach her a lesson. I believed that she was selfish and her behaviour towards my mother was a risk to her health. When we got to 18 Crown Hill, we let ourselves in with a key my mother had left in the recycling box. Upon entering the property, we all went to the front room. A few minutes after arriving, Shauna said she wanted a cigarette and went into the garden. I went to the boot of my car and took out a bag which contained the other items. I took everything upstairs to the landing. I think I then took the items out of the bag before knocking on Rebecca's door. She replied, "What?" or "Hello?" and I said, "Can I see you a minute?" or similar words. Rebecca then opened the door. I am wearing a mask. I cannot be sure in what order things happened immediately after she came to the door, but I used the items I had to subdue Rebecca. During a short struggle, my mask slipped, and Rebecca was able to see my face. This caused me to panic, and I strangled her when she was partially in the bag. I collected the items I'd used, put them and Rebecca into the bag, and zipped up the bag. I also took her phone, tablet, and laptop, together with shoes, some clothes, and a duvet cover from the spare room in a separate bag. I took everything downstairs and put it into the boot of my car. Back in the house, I waited to hear Shauna, then slammed the front door shut. Before going to the front door, I checked that Shauna was not in that room. The rest of the day at the house goes as it would normally if we were there. We leave at around 7 p.m. The rest of the evening passed as usual, but I cannot remember exactly what we did. After Shauna went to bed and sleep, I waited a while. I went out to the car and brought the bags into the house. The following day, we went back to 18 Crown Hill, and I tried to behave as normal. I tried to behave as normal as I could. When we returned to 14 Cotton Mill Lane, I again waited for Shauna to go to sleep. This time, I collected the bag of Rebecca's body and placed it in the bath. In order to stop Shauna using the bathroom the following morning, I poured drain cleaner down the toilet so I could tell Shauna it was blocked again. The toilet would often get blocked, and when this happened, I knew Shauna would not go into the bathroom. I also locked the door. My memory of the days that followed is not perfect, so I'm not sure which day I returned to 14 Cotton Mill Lane, having left Shauna at her mother's, but I think it was the Saturday. When I got back to 14 Cotton Mill Lane, I tried to dispose of the body by cutting it up with a circular saw. Initially, I wrapped up the body parts and took them downstairs and hid them. I'm not sure how many days later, but on another day, I took the body, the saw, and other items to 9 Barton Court, Barton Hill, and placed them in a garden shed. I took them to this address with 2 other people. I did not tell them what was in the bags and box, and I said I would collect them in a few days. Both these people are men, but I do not want to name them. I've chosen to give my account by means of a written statement because I believe I have mental health and learning difficulties that make it difficult for me to say it out loud. So to summarise, Nathan is claiming manslaughter. He had some ridiculous plan to kidnap Becky, to teach her a lesson because she was being mean to his mother. She struggled and he strangled her in a moment of panic. Also note that he's trying to claim Shauna is innocent and had nothing to do with any part of this, which is ridiculous, as I've already hinted at but will return to in a bit. This confession is so stupid. I mean, literally, he should have just written the word derp on a piece of paper and it would make more sense. Anyway, this clip shows around 10 minutes of the interview with Nathan, when the police then tried to question him about the statement he had made. This is one of the most pathetic interviews I've ever seen. This is a man who methodically cut his 16-year-old stepsister into pieces and was smirking during his first police interviews. But now, notice the change in him. Notice the performance, the manipulation. Now he's poor little Nathan. He did a bad thing because Becky was being mean to everyone. Oh, and he has mental health issues and learning difficulties, don't forget. And he's very, very upset. I'm really sorry.
This interview is being recorded at Patchway Police Station in Bristol. It is now Tuesday the 3rd of March 2015 and it's exactly 12 midday. I'm DC 3302, Marie Stephen, and the other police officer present is
DC Mark Luther 2702.
Nathan, can you give us your full name?
Nathan Charles Matthews.
Thank you. And your date of birth?
The 9th of the 1st, 1987.
Thank you. And the other people present in the interview are?
Robin Rowland on behalf of Crossroads Sisters.
And Liz Warlock, appropriate adult.
Thank you. So Nathan, we've had a short break. Perhaps if I just flag up for the recording what this interview is about. It's about the kidnap and murder of Becky Watts. Over the last couple of days we've had 4 recordings. The last was a very short recording and I know you needed to have a break then. I explained to you this morning why we needed to rather than simply take at face value the written statement that you have given to us last night, and we need to explore what you've told us some more. I know that was difficult for you first thing this morning, but that's what we need to carry on and do, and ask you some more questions.
Can you rephrase? I don't know what questions you need to ask, but obviously you said something about Shauna. Can you rephrase it? So you can include basically everybody in it and not use her name. Like,
do you want me to say
I think, yeah,
like
the other person? Is it just saying the name?
Just include everybody. And like, obviously she's in. Obviously, it will be included in it, but include everybody. Don't say her name.
Okay. Okay. I'll do my best to avoid using that name where I can, Nathan, okay? I can't make promises, and what I would say to you is that I'm not going to be doing anything to deliberately wind you up or anything like that, okay? But we've obviously been here a long time, and if I make a slip up, it may well be because I'm tired and those things happen, okay? Can you tell me then, Nathan, because if we work through what you told us in this written statement, this idea that you had...
obviously used, I think you wanted more detail,
yeah.
was it?
Yeah, I do.
Obviously I should be able to go into more detail.
Remember the discussion we had before coming in, though?
Huh?
Remember the discussion we had before coming in?
I don't know.
There are a couple of
Are
ways...
Are you gonna have to read that statement?
No. There are a couple of ways we could get around this.
Obviously, I don't want that to be read to someone.
I don't want to read this out in full again, Nathan, but what I wanted to do was get some more detail from you about things that you've said in it. So perhaps if I could pull out some things from what you've told us and ask you to expand on it, tell us a bit more. Does that sound all right? How about if we start with this idea you had about scaring Becky? Tell me about how that started up then, how you got that idea.
I don't know if it was on TV or something like that, but obviously I had a couple of dreams about...
I think at this point, I can't keep interrupting, but do you remember the discussions we had before you came into interview? And how you and I discussed you dealing with the interview?
What was the question again?
About the idea that you got, and you said it might have been something on TV or you had a dream.
Well, obviously I came up with the idea to scare her, because, like, to try and basically make her more appreciative of life, so she'd be more appreciative for other people. She'd be, like, grateful that, you know, she wasn't harmed or anything like that, or, you know, because obviously she'd leave things out on the floor for my mum to trip over, and obviously would talk to her, like, so saying nasty comments and talk to her like dirt on the floor. As I thought if I was, able to scare her, and obviously her not be harmed, and obviously be released. Obviously when she got back, she obviously would have been scared and more appreciative of things, as people are.
Okay. So tell me what you thought you were going to do. What your plan was.
So obviously stick her in the suitcase. Obviously, put tape around her mouth so she wouldn't make any noise. And then
I don't want to interrupt you, Nathan, but just one thing, it might be difficult to hear this later. Do you reckon you could speak up a bit?
Obviously, the plan was obviously once I got her in the car to make up something to say to Shauna, obviously I had to leave, like to help someone or do something. And obviously I was gonna I was thinking of like a wooded area or whatever to obviously take her back out, obviously still have the mask on, and obviously like scare her and say something along the lines of you've got to start treating people better, not being a bitch or self-centered, and then like make a threat of or this could happen again or worse or something like that. And obviously I hadn't figured out exactly how to obviously walk away after without obviously, I don't know if she'd try and follow. I'm assuming she wouldn't have followed because out of fear we wouldn't want to follow someone who just obviously has done that, and obviously would have come back. But I would have obviously chucked away obviously everything first and then come back, and obviously would have acted as normal. Kept going back to my mum's, and obviously acted as normal.
So when did you think all of this up?
I can't be certain. I'm no good with dates. I've said this repeatedly, and days muddle into other days. I don't have a specific memory of coming up with it, but I remember thinking about it a couple of times. Just basically trying to think of ways to, because obviously she won't listen to me about leaving shit on the floor for my mum to trip up on. She doesn't listen to her dad about it. Just trying to find a way of making her actually listen.
Had you had a conversation with her soon before that?
I can't remember when I last saw her. Like I said in the statement, it could have been Wednesday when we went over, or it could have been the Monday before. It depends on when she was in and when she wasn't in, and if she was in, depends on when she would have come down.
Nathan, do you think you want some legal advice at this stage, given that this is going differently than we discussed?
I don't know, probably here.
Okay. It's 12:11 p.m.
Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. The whiny noises that come from this creature, with him clearly trying to gain as much sympathy as possible. Nathan's quote-unquote confession meant that finally, on March the 3rd, 2015, police attended the home of J. Dean Parsons and Carl Demetrius at 9 Barton Court, arrested them both for assisting an offender, and recovered the suitcases containing Becky's remains from the shed in their garden. They also recovered suitcases and a rucksack that contained, amongst other things, the power saw, blood-stained safety goggles, a screwdriver, handcuffs, blood-stained drain cleaner bottles, blood-stained pliers, and face masks. Later, in Nathan and Shauna's property, a stun gun was recovered. Based on the discovery and his confession, on the 4th of March 2015, Nathan Matthews was charged with the murder of Becky Watts and remanded into custody to await his day in court. Shauna was charged with perverting the course of justice, basically lying to the police about Nathan's movements, and she was remanded into prison, but this was clearly a holding charge. They knew she was involved, and just needed the evidence to prove it. This clip shows part of an interview with Shauna after the discovery of Becky's body, where she denies and deflects, and claims no knowledge of anything, no matter how obvious this lie was.
Is there anything else in relation to Becky's body being found at your house?
If they were found at my house, do you know where she was found?
No. Would you know that?
No. It's more of a curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where he would have hid her, so to speak. I don't know.
Okay. Claire, have you got anything to?
Yeah. If I know that you've said about I wouldn't have any evidence on her, no hair, the skin cells or things like that. But that doesn't stop you from not, because you might not have touched, but you like not knowing. I'm trying to rephrase this. But that doesn't stop you from actually knowing that she was there.
Again,
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I suppose there's no reason that you should or shouldn't believe me. I can just obviously tell you that I genuinely had no idea. I can't even look at him. I was sat in the courtroom today and I just wanted to, I say kill him, that's a bad choice of words. I felt sick looking at him, knowing what he did. And yeah, I didn't always like Becky, but she was a nice enough girl. She was so young.
Shauna didn't realise that she just walked herself into a trap. By claiming that she had not touched anything, if her fingerprints or DNA could be found on any items recovered, they could prove that she was lying. Also, as already outlined, there was clear evidence of them discussing abducting teenage girls, which the police already knew about. Police got a break when they found Shauna's DNA on one of the face masks they recovered, as well as on one of the cases containing Becky's remains, and on bin bags used to wrap her body. So, on the 22nd of June 2015, Shauna Hall was also charged with Becky's murder and remained in prison to await her fate. Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hall went on trial on the 6th of October 2015 at Bristol Crown Court. The pathetic waste of skin called Nathan continued with his fucking ridiculous story that his intention was to kidnap Becky in order to teach her a lesson, and that she had been killed whilst trying to do this. He continues to claim that Shauna had no part in this. Shauna echoed this, playing dumb and pretending she had no idea what had gone on. The prosecution had a wealth of evidence to prove their case, that this was a, quote, sexually motivated kidnap plot carried out by Nathan and Shauna. Their defences fell apart quickly, when it could easily be proven that Nathan had a sexual interest in children, especially ones who looked like Becky, and he and Shauna had discussed about kidnapping a teenage girl. With regards to Shauna, her DNA was found on items that she couldn't possibly have touched unless she was involved. Also, there was the ridiculous idea that she would not have heard a young girl fighting for her life or questioned Nathan carrying a large heavy bag randomly out of the property on the day that she visited. In addition, as already mentioned, the prosecution argued that Nathan would have needed help moving the body, and this would have come from Shauna. Adding to this, Shauna was shown to be with Nathan during the time he'd been dismembering Becky's body and not at her mother's. She also went with Nathan to various shops to buy cleaning products, claiming that she didn't know what this was for. Lastly, there was also her online internet activity, including finding a parody song which referenced hiding a body. The case was so strong that it only took the jury 3 hours to find Nathan Matthews guilty of the murder of Becky Watts, and due to her role, Shauna Hall was found guilty of her manslaughter. In addition, both were convicted of conspiracy to kidnap, perverting the course of justice, preventing the lawful burial of a body, and possession of 2 stun guns, whilst Nathan was also convicted of possession of indecent images of children. In addition, Jadine Parsons and Carl Demetrius, the couple whose shed was used to hide Becky's body, were convicted of assisting an offender, and Jadine was subsequently sent to prison for 16 months. Carl was sent down for 2 years. With regards to Nathan and Shauna, on the 13th of November 2015, they stood before Mr. Justice Dingmans for sentencing. He was barely able to contain his emotions and was later seen to leave the court in tears. He stated that Nathan and Shauna's crimes, including dismembering Becky, were actions that, quote, defy any reasonable explanation. He highlighted the clear sexual motivation for this crime, and whilst there was no evidence to indicate that Shauna had actually been the one to kill Becky, she was shown to be an integral part of this plan. He also said, quote, Mr. Matthews and Miss Hall lied to the family and to the police, pretending not to know anything about Becky's whereabouts at a time when they were in the process of dismembering her. Their deceit of the family was particularly cruel and unusual, and the family's sense of betrayal by Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hall is both understandable and justified. At the same time they were deceiving the family, Matthews and Hall were watching a parody of a song from Frozen, using the words, "Do you want to hide a body?" It's apparent that neither Nathan Matthews or Shauna Hall have truthfully said what happened at 18 Crown Hill to Becky, and I understand the family's sense of frustration about that fact. He then sentenced them. For the murder of Becky Watts, Nathan Matthews was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 33 years before he's eligible to apply for parole. For the manslaughter of Becky Watts, Shauna Hall was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment. Both later appealed their sentences, but they were both denied. People who offend against children are considered the lowest of the low in prison, and some measure of retribution was waiting for Nathan and Shauna after they were sentenced. With regards to Nathan, in January 2017, it was reported that he'd been badly burnt when another inmate threw boiling hot water over him at the high security prison HMP Long Lartin. Shauna appears to have had an even worse time than Nathan. In 2016, it was stated that she'd been beaten so badly by other inmates that she'd had to be resuscitated twice. It appears though that Shauna has survived prison, and given she would have had to have served half her sentence before being released on licence, and taking into account time on remand, she's likely already out of prison or will soon be released on licence to be monitored by probation for the next 8.5 years. No doubt she'll have to keep a very low profile now and for the rest of her life. Nathan has another 25 years before he can even apply for parole, if he survives that long. But, given the heinous nature of his crimes, whether he will ever be considered safe to be released is unclear. Becky Watts was laid to rest on the 17th of April 2015 at St Ambrose Church in Whitehall in Bristol. Hundreds of people lined the streets, and, at a request from her family, many wore t-shirts featuring her photograph and threw pink roses towards the horse-drawn carriage which took her on her final journey. Becky's grave was decorated with blue chippings, her favourite colour, and the inscription on her gravestone reads, quote, Bristol's Angel, Becky, Rebecca Marie Watts, beautiful, affectionate, talented, loyal daughter and friend, taken from us 19th of February 2015, age 16. Bex was loved by everyone, will be missed by all who knew her. Rest in peace, my child. Tanya Watts, Becky's biological mother, did not feel able to attend the service, but paid tribute to her daughter by calling her a, quote, caring, normal, happy, lovely girl, as well as saying, you shouldn't have to bury a child. There are a lot of people on this earth who don't deserve to be here, but Becky weren't one of them. She should be here. Her father Darren and her stepmother Angie were devastated by Becky's death and the ultimate betrayal of both Nathan and Shauna. Darren subsequently released a statement speaking for both he and Angie, which read in part, quote, we both feel we are just marking off time until our demise. Everything beautiful in our lives has been ripped from us in one selfish act of violence, The pain cuts deep into our families. It's destroyed long-standing relationships and marriages. Our children have become isolated and bullied at school. We can't go outside the house without people pointing at us or making comments which they believe we can't hear. When I close my eyes to sleep, I see Becky's death over and over again. I see what they did to my child. I hear her cry out, "What are you doing?" Then I feel her terror as she realises they're not going to stop and she's about to die. I feel her heart racing. I see all this and I'm powerless to help her. All too frequently I awake drenched in sweat and physically shaking. Becky was so small and fragile. She never stood a chance. These nightmares consume my every thought, like advanced cancer. They haunt my days and terrorise my nights. This is the reality of what transpired that day, a legacy I cannot escape. This is my life now. Darren also spoke later about seeing his daughter for the last time, and despite the efforts of the morticians who had sewn Becky back together and wrapped the cuts in bandages, he said he could still see where his daughter had been decapitated. Angie's health declined rapidly after this point, losing the girl she loved like a daughter and raising a monster of a son who could do this. She completely cut Nathan out of her life. I have no real updates about either Darren or Angie. I know they remained married for several years after this incident, but I'm not sure where they are now. However, what is known is that a beautiful young woman who had so much of her life ahead of her was murdered, taken from this life before she'd even had a chance to live it. She wasn't just taken away from her loved ones, but she was robbed of her opportunity to have a family. They destroyed all the laughter, the joy she would have had, her chance to make a mark on the world, which I've no doubt she would have done. Becky, with all my heart, I hope you're at peace. Sleep well, Angel. It's impossible not to talk about these two together, but I'll also discuss differences in their profiles. Nathan Matthews, in my opinion, is much easier to understand. A sad little man who, likely due to his own inadequacies, including his height, wanted to dominate and control women as a way to feel powerful. He likely felt that on a level, he was no match for a woman, had little to offer them, and they would inevitably abandon him, so he targeted children. He knew these individuals would be more naive than him, and he could mould them into what he wanted them to be. Becky was a precocious teenager who knew her own mind, had a strong personality, and was going places compared to him. A man who could not hold down a job, who lived in absolute squalor, and this disparity enraged him. He was also sexually obsessed with her, and wanted to dominate her, and take what he believed he was entitled to. His plan would enable him to achieve both of these goals, use Becky sexually, and remove this object from his life. And I say object purposefully. I've no doubt that Nathan is a psychopath. He has no remorse for his actions, and saw Becky, and all women and female children, simply as things he could use. He methodically dismembered the body of a 16-year-old child, and then sat in an interview with the police smirking. Only when he was trying to save himself did he show any sort of emotion, and this was manufactured, a pantomime, with his sole purpose being to sell this bullshit story to save his own skin. Nathan Matthews is a dangerous man, who I think will always pose a risk to children. In some respects, I find the profile of Shauna Hall more interesting, as it is, in my opinion, far more complex. I've said what I thought about her during this video, with Shauna being a victim initially, falling into the hands of a manipulative, controlling predatory paedophile who moulded her for years, contributing to the monster she became. However, the more I watch her interviews, the more I'm convinced that Nathan merely built upon something that was already within Shauna, or, to be more accurate, missing from her. She is cold, and there is something missing when she speaks. She talks, but there is no emotion there. She's literally like a robot. She shows no signs of distress, and seems incapable of even pretending to care during her police interviews. I think she too is likely a psychopath, who over the years began to also become sexually aroused by thoughts of abducting children for Nathan to abuse. The thing that I think cements my perception of these two as psychopaths is, as I said, the fact they were parents themselves to a female child. Especially with Shauna, becoming a mother appears to have done nothing to change her. She did not then realise the love that other mothers have for their children, and how losing a child is the worst thing a parent can experience. She gave no consideration to keeping that child out of harm's way, or being in their life. No, instead, she allowed them to live in absolute squalor, and took them to an address knowing exactly what was going to happen, and then, likely, had this child in the house when Becky's body was cut up. The same thing goes for Nathan. He couldn't give a shit about anyone else, including his daughter. His need to indulge his sick sexual interest in children was all that mattered. I've read that Shauna was apparently pregnant again with twins when Becky was murdered. So, again, rather than thinking about the lives inside of her and her own daughter, she was solely focused on helping her paedophile partner end the life of someone else's child. As to what happened to these twins, a report in late 2015 said that Shauna was, quote, no longer pregnant. It's unclear whether she had a termination, lost the babies, or potentially she was never pregnant at all, and simply said this to gain sympathy. In addition, I have no idea what happened to the couple's daughter. She'll be around 10 years old now, and I really hope that she's being supported by people who love her, and that they'll help her with the emotional fallout when she finds out what monsters her parents were. Shauna, as I said, is either released or will soon be back in the world, and she will have to keep a low profile and look over her shoulder for the rest of her life. And Nathan, he gets to enjoy at least the next 25 years with his new friends. Let's see how that goes. There are clear parallels between this case and the Ken and Barbie murders. This case relates to a couple, Carla Homolka and Paul Bernardo. Bernardo was a serial rapist and serial killer who killed at least 3 young women, with Carla assisting him and finding him victims, including her 15-year-old sister, Tammy. I will be covering that case in the near future. This was a very heavy, but also I think a complicated case, given that 2 people, a man and a woman, were involved in this horrific crime. So what are your thoughts about the crime itself, but also the profiles of Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare? If you want to become a channel member, then please click on the join button. It's $2.99 a month, or around $4, and you get early access to videos, as well as an icon next to your name. Also, if you want to donate to the channel, then you can click the thanks button to send a one-off payment. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.